Hello, and welcome to Just Your Normal Missfit. I'm Ann Thomas, working to understand neurodivergent people and sharing the perspectives with you. DPS Bangalore North has a team of over 25 special educators. Apart from that, there is a parent group that steps in whenever the school requires any support for their neurodivergent students. Parents come in as writers. Many parents join shadow teachers every single day so that they can join the classrooms alongside their children and support them in their learning. It must be difficult for the teachers to have a parent constantly watching them, but that's not the mindset here. What's important is the child. And for that mindset shift, we are looking at how do we design schools. Multitudes of parents join the school every morning. It must be difficult for the teachers. It must be difficult for teachers to have parents watching them interact with their students, probably feeling judged about or the many excuses that you and I have heard as to why parents must not be allowed into the classroom. But at DPS Bangalore North, every morning, parents join their children wherever required because what is important is the child and what matters is the child. This has required a mindset shift. It means that we are no longer looking at diversity as something that needs to be supported, but we understand that diversity is strength. It's not just a struggle, but it makes beautiful things happen. Joining us today is the architect of this change, Ms. Manju Balasubramanyam. She's an educator for whom education or inclusion is not just a policy requirement, it is a lived experience. And together with her support, many educators have come together and are working at the DPS Bangalore North to see how learning support is not just limited to the classroom, but a way of life. Let's welcome Ms. Manju Balasubramanyam. Welcome to Just Your Normal Misfit. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon. And where do we start? Very recently, at a talk at Christ College, I told the students that they were very unfortunate to come out at this given point of time in the current circumstances where the challenges are very different and complex. And there was a mention about how they would have to thrive like someone in a rainforest. And as I was listening to your TED talk, the rainforest was a very close mention. Let's start there, I believe. Tell us more about how you describe diversity as a rainforest and what you do.
Great. Thank you, Juan, for listening to that TED talk. And thank you for that mention of the rainforest, because I think there is no place, no geographical area on the earth that is as diverse as the rainforest, specifically the equatorial rainforest. And that diversity has allowed the rainforest to survive and thrive through the entire life of the earth, ever since life began on earth and there were full-fledged forests. So while others came and went with the ice ages, the rainforest seemed to have survived. And the answer lies in its diversity, because there's so much flora and fauna, and there's such high levels of adaptability, because again, when you have a lot of life forms, you learn a couple of things. One is to adapt, and then to cooperate, and to coexist, and to cohabit, because you know that there's enough for everyone. So there is competition, but that competition is healthy. And then, for example, if they're foraging on the same grassland, they know I will do it in the morning, you do it in the afternoon, unsaid.
Yeah.
But it's there for everyone. There's no one trying to get over someone. And I think it is so much to learn from nature. If we, as the most intelligent, supposedly, forms on earth, can understand that that's where we need to go and that's where we need to live. And so when you look at human beings, it's very different today in a global world. But earlier we did live in silence. A person in Bangalore lived in Bangalore all their lives, right? But today, with travel becoming accessible, with travel becoming less expensive, people are able to travel across the world, at least across the country. So there are students who've traveled parents who have traveled, support staff who have traveled to other places. And when you go and see other people, you learn about cultures. And then while you see the differences, you also see the commonalities that bring us together as human. And then you start appreciating those cultures. And then you start learning to adjust and adapt. So I see this big connection of how diversity can really make it strong. And when we were younger, all of us, we had this song, Ek Chidiya, Anek Chidiya.
Yes.
And that Anekta Mein Ekta. And they were words. But today, when I work in an inclusive environment, I really believe that inclusion is strength. It's strength.
Tell us how that has impacted DPS Bangalore North. That has been your play area rather, where you've brought in as many changes as possible and a lot of flexibility. Tell us more. Tell us about that journey of how you grew that.
I think what it's done for us in the last 21 years that I've been in the school, it's actually made us lifelong learners in the true sense. Each of us has learned to learn with every student of ours, whether they are neurodiverse or neurotypical or children with special needs, because every child, no matter what background they come from, is different. And the way you reach out to that child is by asking the child, what is it that you want? Rather than me deciding that I think this child doesn't have this, and how can I give her or him this? And most times we have found ourselves to be in the wrong. Sometimes you're right. And that sometimes is by intuition. It's not by anything else. So I think it's made us realize that we know very little. And we have to constantly learn from the child first, from the parents next, and then from experts in the society who work in different areas, because we can't be experts at everything. But if we were to bring a community together, then everybody does their part and the child benefits. And I think that's what we are here for. In school education, you are here for what is a very cliched term, the holistic development of children. We're here for that. And it takes a village to raise a child. So you need everybody there.
So tell me something. You've said 21 years, and I'm sure every step has been over time, small steps that have made this huge impact today. Where did you start? I ask this specifically keeping in mind the many schools and principals who are also now being forced to hear this word inclusion or are having to adapt to a new world. Where should they start? And probably where did your journey start and what could they learn from that?
Ironically, as it might sound, my journey started in the United Kingdom. My husband and I had moved to the UK on a migration visa, and I was working in an all girls school, my first job in the UK. And for the first time there, I didn't hear the word inclusion, but I heard the word SEN, special educational needs. And I found that children with different needs were in the classroom and they were learning support assistants. And these kids were not called lazy or not intelligent enough. They were just called different. And they said, how can we scaffold and how can we give them what they need to learn? And in India, I had seen kids who are not performing, would be told that they're not intelligent enough, or they have lower IQ, or they need to go to a different school or an easier board. But there it was no. If this child doesn't learn this way, what else can I do? For the first time, I saw audio and video in the classroom as a mandate that every teacher had to use video. And then you realize that children who are audio and who use visuals to learn, it's better for them than a teacher who's oratory and is the sage on the stage. So how do you bring multiple modes of communication to reach out to all children? So that became my first space of understanding that all children can learn. And they would take the same examinations, right? Probably with a little accommodation, sometimes no accommodation, just extra time, or with a reader support or a scribe. All this I was seeing for the first time. I went to CBSE schools myself, and I knew there were some accommodations in the board, But no one did apply because schools didn't know what to do. And so they couldn't speak to parents. The one thing that I didn't like in the UK system was they would put children in sets. So if you were top ability, all the children with that ability would be in set 1, and the kids who were the lowest ability would be put in set 4 or set 5. And there you labeled them for life, that you would always be set 4 or set 5. While in India, I'd seen that there were teachers who knew how to get to a child who was not getting what they were expecting them to be doing, but would sit with them one on one, work with them, and get them to be a part of us. And I remember my father teaching me and the boy who worked for our domestic help, and he went to a better college than I did. And so, this understanding that if the right support comes to all children, and that support could be very different. In someone's case, it might be a little help with math. In another case, it would be how do I teach that math problem in a different way? Or for another child, it would be how do I use music because the child is very fond of music? How can I teach a complex concept like DNA replication through a song? And so those words are going to stay with them forever. So this whole understanding came for me in the UK. And when I moved to DPS Bangalore North in 2004, the school was 2 years in its growth. And I asked the management for audiovisual smart boards in the classroom. And I said, I want that. Is that possible? And they made it possible. So all our classes that year went digital. And so I could play music, and I taught 8th to 10th science then. And I would bring music and drama and theater into the classes to the extent that when after I left, the children would still be singing the song. And the other teachers would say it's very difficult to get them out of biology or chemistry back to a geography class. But I just so realized that all children can learn to love a subject if you brought those different styles. We were into our first board year, and there were children who were struggling. And as it was, because we didn't have much of an idea, these children were asked to move to a state board. But I asked my principal then, I said, I don't want these children to move to any other school. I want to give it our best shot. What can we do? And she said, I don't know very much, but there is Spastic Society of Karnataka, and they run the open school, the NIOS, which is very flexible. And so let's go and meet them. So we went to Spastic Society and met Ms. Kairali Nair, who was heading their NIOS wing, their vocational wing. And she was my first mentor into inclusive education. And she opened the doors for NIOS. And we started the NIS program, taking the flexibility, the options in subjects. And while we were doing that, we started exploring what CBSE had to offer. So being a formal system, they didn't allow too much of flexibility in dropping subjects. But if we had RCI certification saying the child has dyslexia or dysgraphia or dyscalculia, we could get accommodations. And this was 2004. But then the number of disabilities in the CBSE were about 7. So we could only opt for that. And in 2016, with the RPWD Act coming in, it moved from 7 to 21. So by then we had already, so we looked at the CBSE and with its accommodations and exemptions, and then we looked at NIOS, and then NIOS became an integral part of us. So we started having children in regular school opting for NIOS Monday to Friday. And we also looked at children who could not do a Monday to Friday and could do Saturdays. So that's where it started. And we realized that special educators are hard to come by. We didn't have a special educator on campus then, but we looked for a counselor. And then who actually worked as both. And she had some background in IPSID. And thereafter, in 2010, I took over the school. So then I could unleash my dreams. So we went full josh trying to look for special educators and counselors, and Spastic Society came to my rescue again. And I said, we're really not finding people because special educators have very thriving private practices. And so someone coming into school was a problem. So Spastic Society said we'd like to empower you. So we started getting into a training program with Spastic Society and Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan for a certificate program on inclusive education, and then another 6 months on specific learning disabilities. We started with leadership with about 30 of us, and then we would run 2 batches every year. And we hope that in a couple of years, every single teacher who is in DPS Bangalore North is trained. Now, we couldn't have done this without management support because they absolutely believed in us and just said, go ahead, because there was no trendsetter for us. There was no school in the past who had taken such steps. So, because we started opening our doors and saying, we love to have your children. We don't know everything about what to do with them or how to help them, but we are certainly going to give a space where the child will have a social connect. Your child will make friends, and learning will happen later. And you tell us how you work with your child, and then we will learn a little more from experts. So that was our attitude. And the credit goes to my teachers too. And then I was teaching as well. So we would work together, we would sit together, we would sit with parents, and then we would go back to Spastic Society and ask them to come and observe our classes. We'd say, we are doing what you've asked us to do. Please come and watch us and tell us where. So, from what language we had to use to how would we interact with parents, what would we tell a child, how would we accompany a child to NIMHANS for a review. And Dr. Shekhar Sheshadri, has called me a couple of times and said, I don't like the way you're handling this child. Come into my office and I want to talk to you. And we went back in all humility saying, we don't know, we are sorry, but our intention is only to reach the child, and any support that you're offering to give us is welcome. So we learned step by step. We had young special educators and counselors who came from college, fresh, very keen to work, full of ideas, and very supportive children. And I think I give a lot of credit to my students because our youngest child on the autism spectrum would be 3 years old, and our oldest child would be 18. And never has a child come and told me that someone threw my tiffin box or someone tore my shirt or bit me. Never. And because kids don't speak about it, their parents know. Because when if the parent were to ask, they would say, it's okay, ma, my friend is different. And the credit for the children being so empathetic goes to the teachers because they constantly sensitize and they constantly work with the special educators trying to find out what is it that this child needs. Even at the interview level, when we know, then we start working with the special educator saying, if this child is going to come to us in June, what should we do? And the special education team, and the counseling team is fantastic. We have a team size of about 23 and some more people added to it. And they are on their toes 24. And they are advocates of children. They will go no end. They will fight with the board. They will fight with NIOS till their children get what they need to get.
So you said something very interesting right now, which is that the children are empathetic because of the teachers. And this is a conversation that I have often with various teachers as to how you emulate and how you make sure that your interaction in the class, how does that bring a certain level of empathy or inclusion or acceptance to each and everyone's behavior. So, could you give me some examples of how a situation you very clearly said might a child might bite, a child might get aggressive, a child might push another person, or might be upset and throw some books, and that could be neurodivergent or neurotypical. Multiple reasons must be coming hungry from home or and just frustrated about something that's happening at home. How does a teacher handle that situation? What are the few things that you could immediately tell some teachers that you have an aggressive child in your class or somebody who's behaving aggressively, rather, if I was to use the correct language, a child who's behaving aggressively today, how do you handle that child?
So let me go back a little bit and say, because we are inclusive, during our admission times, we let parents know that this is an inclusive school. And there will be children who would be different to your child. There will be children on the autism spectrum. And today, luckily, I think, thank you to Tare Zami Par, parents are aware of neurodiversity. And so we let them know and we say, if you're all right with this, then your child is welcome to the school. I think being transparent is very important with the parents who are coming in. I've never had a parent say, because I've heard it from very elitist schools, that if my child is with this child, my child will start behaving in this manner. I've never had any parent tell me that. Never, ever. One is, parents choose our school not only if they have a child with special needs, but also if they want their children to be more humane and to see the difference when you are in an inclusive environment. So that's one thing. The second is, teachers need a lot of support when you are handling an inclusive classroom, right? With the senior teachers who had a number of years in teaching and who come from typical mainstream classes where the teacher is the authority and the students are passive learners, it's more difficult to reach out to them, right? Because they believe all children should behave in a set manner. So a lot of our training goes through case studies with them. As how do we respond? This is, so we get it out from them. How do you respond? Would you shout at the top of the child if the child is screaming? Or will you just let the class disperse and get everybody back to their seats and sit down with the child and let the child calm down and then speak to the child? Or if you are not capable of handling that situation, would you know who the line of reporting is? You stay there, send a child to call the next teacher or the coordinator. So we follow a standard operating procedure depending on where the teacher is. But very regularly, we have these sessions that we do with teachers on how do you handle aggression in the early years, right? How do you handle a child who's had a meltdown? How do you handle a child who is throwing tantrums at the school gate and refusing to come in? How do you handle passion and anger in adolescent years? My girlfriend is now with him, and so I'm going to go and bash him up. And those bashing ups happen. So, how do you handle that? Depending on the segments that teachers are working with, we help teachers train, and then we have a line of people who are at every level to talk. But we believe in talking to students and spending a lot of time working with children and trying to understand from them. So most days we stay back pretty late. There is something or the other happening, and yeah, that's how we do. There are laid down procedures as well. We believe in restorative justice. We believe in people talking, both parties sitting together and having a talk as to why a particular thing happened. But there is also a space when there are extreme cases of physical harm where a child is given a cooling off period and the school counselor starts working with the child. And we also recommend therapists outside who would be non-judgmental, who will see the child with a different lens. So there are multiple processes that we engage in.
A very common argument that a lot of people say is inclusion is very time consuming and very expensive, and there is no time for it, and there is no money for it. What do you have to say to people like that?
I would like to tell them that they are in the wrong. The only thing that you need for inclusion is your heart in the right place. That is all you need. You need a group of trusted adults who believe in children. Whether it's the parent or the teacher, you have to believe in your child. And I think these two factors and a team, because inclusion is teamwork. It's not about one principal or one teacher. It is about the team. It's about the security guard who welcomes the child into the school. the bus driver and the attender on the bus, the housekeeping staff who take care of the washrooms, the teachers, the students, the parental community, everybody. And if you have a team that's bought into this thought, then, and the management, obviously, because it's not exorbitantly expensive, but you will have to have a little more resource than a regular school. You will have to have more teachers, because when you work with smaller groups, you will need a teacher for every 5 or 6 children, because they cannot, in the same classroom, they'll be sitting together, but you will need another teacher to work with them on a table. And so managements will have to invest in more staff. That is the only expense that I see, and the expense in professional development, because it's not one training, it's constantly training, right? So you will need to train on specific learning disabilities. You will have to train on how to work with children who are visual impairment, the science behind it, where do you get them seated in the class, how do you work with adolescent children, how do you work with children who are coming into the first time into school and who have this separation pang, because kindergarten teachers feel it's normal, right? We've always had 3 years old, but 3 years old today are different, right? They come with a lot more learning than 3 years olds did earlier. They come with their rhymes, they come with their numbers, they come with the letters of the alphabet. They've all seen it on YouTube. So what are you going to do more in the classroom? How much more exploratory are you going to be, rather than put that crayon into my finger and say, start scribbling now? So there are different challenges, and I think all that goes into working with children.
So you often say it's not how I teach, but it's how they learn.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'd say that again and again.
Yeah.
And because my own example is, I started losing my vision around grade 11. But because I was a very good listener, I always stood first in the class. So my parents didn't know till my brother fainted in class, and both of us were taken for a night test, and I landed up with a power of minus 4.5. And so I became a very good orator, because I could listen. But I was not kinesthetic, right? And I realized that however good a lecture I gave or whatever I spoke, there were some kids in my class who didn't just seem to get what I was doing. And that's when I tried, if this child was always running up and down, what could I do? How could I engage this child to teach the rest of the class something about levers? How could I make them use their hands and legs to say where the joints are and how those joints move, and probably a window moves like that, right? And in that process, the student said, okay, she understands what I need. And to do that, I will start doing something else. So this whole understanding of multiple intelligence, which was learned as theory, actually became my practical ground in the classroom. And then kids would say, why don't you do this lesson in this particular manner? I'd like to do an interview. Kids who never spoke in class were given a topic to teach, and they would come and absolutely put me to shame. They did a much better job than I did. Right? So I seriously believe that we need to get to children in the way they learn. My own 2 children were my biggest examples. They taught me how I need to teach others, because they didn't want to work in any regular way. And now I learn more with my grandson, who's 6 years old, because he learns completely differently. And so, how do I reach numbers and math concepts through cars that he likes? Or how do I get him to know about the world with a cartoon character like Bluey, who lives in Australia, who fascinates him? Right. So I think you need a very involved teacher to be doing this.
Invested teacher.
Very invested.
And I find that very challenging when you do look around, because of the kind of education system that we have created. Finding somebody who wants to be a teacher, first of all, and second, very invested, seems to be a constant challenge for schools across India, right? If you speak to any principal today, they'll say, teachers milna to bahut mushkil hai. And you almost think that 10 years back what was happening? Was there, what was so different that automatically everybody was a che teacher? So I often wonder why that has happened, and how do you create a process or an SOP, as you said, to make invested teachers? You can't expect everybody to come in and say, it's like the
Absolutely.
same process that you're looking for a student. Different students in a classroom, different interests, different processes, different mindsets. How do you get these teachers, all coming from different backgrounds, to now follow an SOP that you have created, and you are telling them that this is very good because their learned experience and their lived experience is very different? Their lived experience is telling them, oh, these kids are problematic. These are the problem children. These are the ones, oh, uski mummy aayingi and she will throw a tantrum. The ones, mothers who advocate are the bad guys. So, how do we create that as a system or a structure?
You rightly said, if you want to help children, you have to help teachers first, because they have their lived expectations, their lived experiences, their cultures that they come from, saying teacher is authority, right? And today we know that there's wisdom in a 3-year-old, there's innate wisdom, and that wisdom could teach you a lot, right? So we do so many sessions with each other as teachers, as groups, not as leadership versus teachers, but as teachers as a whole, whether it is in professional development that comes as a mandate from CBSE and DPS Society, to newer programs that we look at with socio emotional learning through an organization called LearnX that we do online, where case scenarios are presented to teachers and teachers say, how do you navigate? What would your response be? What would your language be? And we do different levels of it. So our teachers have done 2 levels and they have another 2 levels to go. So we constantly engaging in such situations and in these programs. My counseling team does a lot of hard work. They constantly work with teachers in small groups and in larger groups with issues that are segment specific. We also started having focus group discussions with parents, where the teacher and the parent comes together to look at issues and say, all right, if what we said didn't work, what do you think will work? Or how would you like us to approach your child? Or how could you work with us to make this possible? I think never say no attitude is what we've developed. And so we're constantly talking. We call in experts from the field to come and speak to us. We also do regular surveys on where are we at our understanding of inclusion. So with all that we do, and with all that, the number of sessions that we conduct, formal and informal, we still find that we would have about 20% of teachers who don't understand our culture of inclusion. So we call them out. Now, instead of being a whole group, we call them separately and we work with them over a period of a year. If they are senior teachers who've had a lot of experience but don't have the mindset, and then we say, look, we work with you, but this is the culture of the school. If after that 1 year also their attitude doesn't change, that means their mindset is not to work in an inclusive setup. They might be excellent teachers, but then they don't fit into the system. And so that information is also given to them that you could move on. With the younger teachers, we invest a lot of time because they are fresh out of college. Everything in a large school could be overwhelming. And then the challenge of inclusion. But it is also my understanding that they adapt faster, right? Because they are keen learners. They also are not stuck in stereotypes, right? And so they change. And I should also give credit to a lot of senior teachers who have absolutely unlearned and relearned. They've erased all their learning and have started afresh, saying, this time I want to reach out to my child and I don't want to see the child with violence. So I think the greatest credit goes to them.
Give us some examples of the stereotypes that you see a lot with teachers. I just want someone to be able to hear this conversation and say, oh, I have done this. Something that hits you over and over again.
So, one is language in the classrooms, specifically in urban private schools, has undergone a major shift. Teachers don't use words like idiot and stupid anymore.
Yeah.
They can't. With corporal punishment in there, you just cannot use. So, one is people have become more mindful of what they're doing. But this kind of conversations कि बेटा आप मैथ्स नहीं कर सकते ना तो मैथ्स छोड़ दो आप इंजीनियर मत बनना आप आर्ट्स ले लेना now who am I to decide whether my child can do science or not do science? My job is to try my best as to how do I work with my child. This has happened with my own daughter. She was told you're very beautiful, so you can be an air hostess but you can't do science. Today she's a scientist and she's a lawyer. She also models. Things like that. You're not working hard enough.
Oh my God, that one really
Right?
bugs me.
Yeah. You are just not working hard enough. The child is writing all his notes in class, goes back and copies it into his rough notebook again, but is still not able to perform in the exam and say, you're not working hard enough. You need to work harder. Or telling the parent, why don't you give up your job and sit with the child? The child needs your time and attention. And many a times people have turned around and asked me, the person who said that to me is a spinster. She might be a teacher, but she's a spinster. How does she know what it is to raise a child? So have you also learned that what are the conversations? So we invest on what kind of conversation do you have with parents or children? What language is appropriate? How do you use disability first or person first language? Right? Do I say a child on the autism spectrum or do I say an autistic child? And then we began to ask children, how would you like to be addressed? Conversations like, you are the special educator's child. You're not supposed to be in my class. You're supposed to be with the special educator because you're the special educator's child. And children don't want that, right? To be said that you don't belong to this group, you are somebody else's. And that's where this whole block comes saying, where parents and children come and say, no, we don't want any accommodations and exemptions because we don't want to be somebody else's child. We want to be in the classroom. So you're the counselor's child. You need therapy. And saying, so these are things that it's not intentional, but it has very long lasting impressions on children's minds.
So we have, I think it's a generational thing. I think I got a lot of it. My son gets a lot of it. My niece gets a lot of it. You have a lot of potential. If only, that if only would be that particular word that would change. If only you did this, and that you're not going to achieve a certain level at some point of time. So for a child like my son, who's extremely intelligent, who's already bored with your class and does not have something to do, he's going to be destructive to certain extent, or play with his pen and drop a pen and distract you, etc. I have got all of these sentences, by the way. I have received, I don't think you should take the job opportunity. You should stay home and spend more time with your child. And I'd be like, have you been with a single parent at any given point of time and seen how they're going to fund the child's education if they're going to sit at home and with their son? So, yeah, the constant language that we use with children, where we write them off without even realizing it. And I also am on the other side, where I find that we are having to push our child a lot more to fall into a certain structure, and it just is a waste of your energy, time, effort, money, but you still doing it. That argument continues in my head, and it's so nice to see that there's that visibility. First of all, the very fact that today you cannot hit a child, though it continues across the country, it has a huge impact. But now the language that we use, why do you have hair that is so long? I saw a lot of these things that you had mentioned, that children can wear what they choose to wear, right? Whether they're comfortable with a skirt or a pant or a shorts, they can choose that for themselves. That choice, where you're allowing children to do what they prefer to do.
We have a flexibility, but within a framework.
Yeah.
So if I say that because we are a school that wears a uniform, there has to
Absolutely.
be uniform, right? And the uniform has to be of a certain length, which is prescribed. You have to tuck in your shirt, you'll have to wear a tie, and you have to wear it with the discipline that a uniform requires. The whole idea of having a uniform is that we are all equals. Nobody can say that I have a school uniform that is Gucci, and nobody can say that it was like some mills in some Coimbatore. So it's the same uniform. That's the whole idea. But given that we are more conscious that there might be girls who are not comfortable wearing skirts and they would like trousers. So my students decided to test me. So after a bunch of girls did a survey and found out that they would be more comfortable, we allowed for trousers for girls. So the next year I had the boys come and say, we'd like to have ponytails and skirts. And I said, don't take my inclusion to that level, not yet. You boys will still have to have short hair as prescribed, as shown in the picture. Let me see that when you go to college, you have a ponytail, but in school, you will have to have your hair in place and you're not wearing skirts. We are not yet Scottish.
I have always argued as to why we had this rule of a hairband with short hair, and I used to get so frustrated because sometimes I had hair shorter than the boys and they'll wear a hairband. And then what's the point? Why is that boy getting away with not wearing a hairband while I have to? And it's the same. My son loves long hair and he
Yeah,
hates getting a haircut. So
yeah,
it's a very
yeah.
painful, sensitive, sensory problem that he has.
Sure.
And but he has to cut his hair. That's the expectation of the school. So
Yeah.
then we say, suck it up, and we have this whole drama. I'll give you, I'll tempt you, I will do this to get the haircut. But yeah, I hear you.
But yes, I do believe that empowering student voice is the first step towards inclusion. And we had a student who was actually a self advocate, and he is our first teacher towards our journey on inclusion. Ranveer Anand is no more, but everything that we know of infrastructural design and accessibility is because of him, because over a period of time, his illness of Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, he had to move from being moving around into a wheelchair. But he asked the school to give ramps and elevators. He asked for railings on the wall. He asked for accessible toilets. He asked to do science in grade 11 and to change our labs. He asked to be head boy of the school. And he did it all. He did it all on his own, but he was a self advocate. And he said, I'm not leaving the school. You will have to give me what I want. And I think he just created that space, saying not his parents, but he knew what he wanted. And he was very clear that this is what I want for myself. And this is when teachers would say, come to the playfield. We are an inclusive school. So come to the playfield. If you're not playing, at least cheer or do the scorecard. And then one day he came and told me, I don't like doing any of this. Right? I'm good with academics. I'd like to sit in class and read. If I'd loved cheering, I would have been there, but I'm not happy there. Put me in the classroom and you have any student who's struggling, put them with me, I'll teach them. That's what I'm good at. And that's what we did, because our whole idea was like, he should be playing with kids or he should be cheering, he should be doing this. So we, in our enthusiasm, we wanted him to be everywhere. And he said, I know where I want to be. Can you let me be?
Yeah.
So that also, that everybody doesn't have to do everything.
You have more than 3 boards in your school. Could you tell us a little more of that?
We have 5 boards on the campus. We have CBSE, which is the main. We have Cambridge as the other international board, and we have a small cohort of IB. And we have NIOS, which is the non-formal Indian board in a large strength. And we have the PUC board, but that's separate. But on the same area, in the same area, we have 5 boards.
What led you to saying, I need more than one board? I hear the story behind the open schooling, the NIOS board coming in. What was the logic behind it and how are you managing it?
Our whole idea has always been to cater to diverse needs, whether it's parental needs or student needs. Bangalore being the IT hub, a lot of families would move from the US or the UK or Australia for some time because the parents had their parents here or they wanted their children to have a little exposure to Indian culture and spend some time with the families. So we started the Cambridge board to cater to their needs because they wanted to go back and seamlessly integrate into a curriculum abroad. So the Cambridge came in with that. The IB program that we started was the IBCP, the career pathway, which is more skill oriented. And so you start grooming children in grade 11 and 12 into specific spaces. So that was we've just had our first IBCP results, which are fantastic. So that was it, to move towards a board that is robust at handling skill development because CBSE is just getting into skilling and we see that as a future. The PU board, because there were students who didn't want to leave our campus and go for integrated coaching somewhere else. They wanted to be on the campus where they had spent 13 years. So CBSE doesn't allow it. So we said we could have a PU board, which is easier and gives them a little more time for their coaching, whether it is for engineering, medicine, or CA or CS. Yeah.
For parents, I find that the number of boards that have come up, if you look at the older, my child studied in CBSE, my child studied in ICSE, it was very simple. But for parents who are looking to understand these different boards, what would be a quick way to say, if you're looking at a certain piece, this is the board that suits you? Do you have any advice there?
So there are multiple factors that help parents decide on the board that they want to go with. If you're going to stay in India and your child is go into the traditional pathways or the alternate pathways, CBSE is the most student friendly board. It is very student friendly. It is very doable. It's a dynamic board. It has been adapting to the changes that are happening globally. So CBSE is there. ICSE is coming there now with Dr. Joseph Emmanuel moving from CBSE to ICSE. So CBSE is very robust. Our children from CBSE do very well when they go abroad to study. Now, CBSE classes are about 40 in a class, right? And there's 40 children and there's one teacher. The pedagogical styles are changing rapidly. So the classes are more interactive, they're more child centric. But if you want a project based learning kind of an environment where you want children to be inquirers, there's a lot more of thinking and doing that is expected, then an international board, Cambridge, works on it. Now, because the class strength is small, their maximum class strength is 24. So there is a lot more scope for collaborative learning. The curriculum is planned in such a way that it's all application based and that starts very early on, right? So if that is what your intent is and you are sure that you're going abroad, then having an A levels means you have straight A's in your A levels, and then you walk into a university in the UK. With CBSE, you have to still show your marks and stuff like that. So that little thing is there. You can take German or French as a second language from the beginning. That is from grade 1. So then you are ready for German universities or French universities. So those are some of the added advantages. But Cambridge is again a very formal board. It is examination oriented. The IB is on a different level as well. But then the IB is for children who can work independently and on their own and they're self motivated in the senior classes. Otherwise, IB could be a disaster if children don't and they need a little support and they need structure to their learning, then IB is too fluid. The NIOS, like I said earlier, is highly flexible. Children can choose what they want to do. They can do science and business and music in 10th standard. In CBSE, they cannot, right? They can take the 10th board exams over 2 years. They can take exams every 6 months and do very well because some kids just can't take 5 exams together. That is their problem. You don't have to have 75% attendance. I could be unwell. I might be wanting to do an internship, or I might be training to be a sportsman, and being in school every day might not be feasible for me. So all these things the NIS offers, and I think a lot of NEP, what the NEP is talking about is already there in the NIS. No hard silos, the flexibility to choose subjects, all of that.
So do you spend time with parents around the 10th trying to explain this? And is there a lot of counseling that happens before students pick up a specific board?
We do a lot of counseling till grade 5. We do our own levels of identifying where children are struggling. Is the gap in learning coming because of a background? English is not spoken at home.
Yeah.
Parents are financially sound, but the child is a first generation learner. Or is there's a birth in the family and the mother's gone for her delivery and she's taken this kid away for 6 months, so the child has not been in school. Or is there a learning disability? But till grade 3, we really don't put children through tests because they're too young for us. Just because a P is written as Q, I can't say the child has dysgraphia. I'm not going to say that.
Yeah.
So I'll wait. We'll work on strategies. But after grade 6, if we still find that the child is struggling with language or math, then we will certainly ask the parents to take them for an assessment. The board allows for exemptions in language and math in 9th and 10th.
Yeah.
We say if the child has a certificate saying that the child has a problem, why am I going to make this child suffer for the next 4 years? So I will start giving the exemptions from grade 6. So we'll get the third language off, we'll get the second language off, we'll put in a subject like IT or some kind of a programming that the child is good at and work on the other subjects rather than put the pressure on them up till the grade 10th where it is. While some parents accept this earlier, there are parents who will take years, will be in denial. And especially if they're high achieving parents, it's very difficult for them to understand. They would say that I was like this when I was a child and I did it. So if you don't have the parents buy-in, you can do nothing. So you will still then start working with the child as much as you can. But in grade 8, then we ask for a second assessment because grade 9 is the time when we have to start filing in the papers to the board for them to get the exemptions. And because there could be malpractices, CBSE doesn't look in for exemptions in grade 10. So we'll have to get it sorted. So either the child takes the exemptions and stays with CBSE or doesn't take the exemptions and continue with CBSE, in which case our job is to help the child at least pass. Or where the parent is flexible, we then ask them to take up the NIS, which is also full-time in our school. The child doesn't do Saturdays. Monday to Friday, they're in school and they do their subjects. So it is a lot of conversation, but again, because we've been running it for so many years and there is parental belief. And then we have other parents. We put parents who are struggling to understand with parents who've gone through this. And they then share their experience. We have senior students who are successful, who went through the NIS with disability, are in the workplace. And they come back and talk to students saying, these are the subjects we took, this is what we took in college, and this is what we're doing today. It's reaffirming the possibilities and the opportunities that can come if you choose the right path for you.
What are some of the exemptions that are offered across the boards that parents could request for? Is it via the school or is it individually? How do parents access these exemptions as well?
So I can speak for the CBSE confidently, and the Cambridge also has a similar process. The process for applying goes through the school, but it would require a request from the parent, a letter from someone who can give a certification after an assessment report. The child has these issues and would require these accommodations. The RCI trained certified assessors know exactly what accommodations the boards give. So basically, it would be extra time. So if it's a 3-hour paper, the child would get an hour extra. So 20 minutes per hour. So if it's a 3-hour paper, you'll get an hour extra. So the child can finish the paper in 4 hours. If the child is slow at writing, you could have a scribe support if the child cannot write. So a junior student can write for the student. You could have an adult prompter or an adult reader. In cases of non-verbal children on the autism spectrum, you could have the parent come in the child can write and the parent can refine or write it on the answer script, or the child can type onto a computer and the parent can write the paper on their behalf. So you have that. So adult prompters, scribes, and support. You have exemptions. So is calculated exempted from math. If you have dyslexia, language. We've had a child who's been exempt from 3 subjects, including science. If you are diabetic, then you have provisions to take food into the examination hall and water and to go to the washroom as many times as you want. Children with thalassemia or hemophilia have that. Children with visual impairment have modified question papers in the sense that they will not have question papers with graphs or any pictorial, they will have another question. Children can use the JAWS software. Visually impaired students can use JAWS, so that provision is there. You could have sign language interpreters explain or solve doubts for children. Now, because the numbers are few, it would be these children would be sent to a particular center or to the RO's office where a sign language interpreter could come and explain the question. So currently there are 21 disabilities that it looks at, from physical disabilities to intellectual. And there is a wide range of accommodations and exemptions that are possible.
But most schools don't offer these exemptions or do not even speak about these exemptions. And it's very often that parents like us who say, no, these are options available to you. Please go and find out. Please go and ask. Please go and advocate. How do you work around that?
I don't know what to say because they're from the same fraternity, but I think it's just lack of understanding, which is not there anymore because the board is beating down everything and saying you will not get your affiliation if you don't have a special educator. And your special educator should, data now is recorded in platforms like UDICE and the student tracking system STS in Karnataka. We were the first state to start that, where information about every child is put in and it's tracked year after year as to what they're doing. This understanding of how many children are there with special needs in the school. Do you have a special educator? What kind of work is happening with them? Where are the IEPs? So there is now a demand. But even the other day when the CBSE chairman was in Bangalore, he said there are about 50,000 schools, CBSE schools, only 300 are actually inclusive. But they are. 10 years ago, the word inclusion didn't exist. And if people said, they said you come from a different planet, it might be possible in America, not in India.
Correct. Yeah.
Right? But today, I have schools asking me, how do you deal with this? How do I ensure that this child takes the board exam? Schools that do not have scribes or have not trained scribes will come and ask, can your child be a scribe for a child of mine in this particular school? Yes, but very often, and that's why I always think and I always say that inclusion is leadership driven. If the principal of the school says, I'm sorry, we don't have children like this in our community.
Ah, that's the favorite.
हाँ,
दो हाथ
so
मारो तो सब ठीक हो जाएगा.
so then it's the mindset of that principal. There is a wheelchair, but कोई यूज ही
Nobody
नहीं
else is.
करता. क्यों नहीं? क्योंकि आपने कहा ही नहीं कि आप आ जाओ. So I think that mindset shift change is happening, and it will happen when more schools like us talk about the work we are doing and saying that it really is not so difficult. But given and said all that, I'm very lucky to be in Bangalore.
Yeah.
We have NIPSID, we have Spastic Society, we have the Chandrasekhar Institute for the speech, and then we have the National Association for Blind, we have EPD, we have the Bubble Center for Autism, we have everything, and there are people willing to come and share their expertise with us. But in remote India, this is not going to be possible. And I think that's where the problem arises. There's an example that I always give of a school in Uttarakhand. I worked with that principal. And in the Himalayas, blindness is an issue. So he had learned Braille and he was teaching Braille to all the teachers in that community. He was a Braille trainer. And he was doing his PhD on how do you teach children with blindness in mainstream schools. So there's phenomenal work happening in pockets. And I think inclusion is so in silos and people need to meet more and share practices to understand. But Bangalore is doing some really good work. And I always believe that there are schools that suit every kind. There could be mainstream schools that could be inclusive to take care of mild and moderate cases. And there needs to be special case schools for children who are on the extreme end because they need social interaction as well.
True.
And you will not be able to give a one-on-one support like that in a mainstream school. And then you could also have homeschooling where the child has the NIS experience of coming into the school once in a while to meet friends. So there's place for everything. But yes, mainstream schools can really change the way we look at education.
A lot of times we talk about challenges or neurodivergence in the lack of. What about the children who are actually struggling because they are twice exceptional, as in they might have more than one challenge, or they are gifted in a certain level? And as I said, how do we cater to these kids and are they considered at DPS Bangalore?
It's always more difficult to work with the gifted because they go unnoticed. Because you are always trying to bring the children who are sinking to the level or the ones who are at level to the next level. So, very often, like we've had children on the Asperger's syndrome go on to be head boys of the school. But when they were children in school, they were bullied by the rest of the class because they were so different and they just would not fit into the bracket. They wouldn't make friends easily. They would be very sensitive to what people had to say. And those kids would get bullied, and the teachers would not understand what was happening out there. If a child is struggling with academics and is quiet and is sad, the teacher will reach out and say, "Are you all right?" But this child who's getting 79 out of 80 and getting an 80 out of 80 is getting bullied, they will say he'll handle it, whether he can or he cannot. But that's the idea. Also, like you said, your son gets easily bored. So there could be another child, one child who's extremely intelligent and gets bullied because he's called a nerd or he's different. Or this kid who's very intelligent and is getting so bored in the class that is beginning to get disruptive. So we had, and many times teachers feel challenged by these children because they keep asking why. They are the ones who tell the teacher, this is wrong. This is actually this. And the teacher will say, okay, keep quiet. And don't talk more than you have to. I know what I'm doing. So they then resort to troubling others and they will go pick on others. They'll go push someone else. And because they are intelligent, they also know ways of harming people without getting noticed. So they'll pick on someone to do their work and that person will get caught. This has been a learning for us. When we got into differentiated learning, we said, let's see the time at which children finish their tasks. So if a kid is finishing the task in 5 minutes and I have the rest of the 30 minutes left with me, I will need to do something more with this child. So whether it was getting into peer learning, getting this kid to work with another child, or giving them the next level of exercises, or if not that, allowing them to read a book that they've brought from home, or to solve the Sudoku in the newspaper, we've opened ourselves. Because earlier, if a child finished his work and started reading a storybook, we would have said, oh no, you're not mindful enough, you're not respectful of what I'm doing. So the teacher will snatch the book away. But today we say, okay, you finish your task, show it to me, now do what you want to do without disrupting the rest of the class, or do the next level of exercise that we are doing. We find it difficult for these children who are on the Asperger's syndrome to become social because that's a part of their trouble. Yeah. So how do we build communities for them? How do we find people who will work with them? As they grow, it becomes easier because the other students start coming to them for academic support if you're gifted. So then you realize that this friend of mine is just not someone who sits quietly in the corner, but who can help me. But in the lower classes, because these children are a little clumsy and they can't manage their things on their own, the other children begin to. But again, a lot of conversation with the class, with the students works. We've always not been very successful. We've had times when such gifted children have left us, have moved on, because they didn't feel comfortable enough. They would get into trouble every other day, that their parents would be called in and over a period. So one particular child came up to me and said, I think, ma'am, I'm made for homeschooling. And he was in grade 4 at that time. And he would talk about building tree houses and how to keep the dynamics there, how to keep the air circulation there. Today, I hear from his teacher that he's finished A levels as a private candidate and he's doing very well. He's going to the UK. But we learn from our mistakes as well. We learn from our failures. You can't be successful all the time with every child, but at least you're making that effort. You're trying to understand, and then everybody find people find their spaces.
Yeah. You also have a lot of vocational training and focus on arts and sports. Would you like to tell us how did that emerge for the school and how has that evolved?
This is something that I'd really like to talk about because academic inclusion is natural. If you belong to a particular board and there's a mandate from the government, you have to follow. You have to have infrastructure that is accessible. You will need staff. You will need a curriculum that is universal design. But how do you make art as an integral part of learning? And I think color and art and design is something that appeals to all children. It's just that we only look at one form of art, and that is coloring. And art can be the performing arts, it could be sculpture, it could be drama, theater, whatever. It could be yoga. So we have been very lucky to have teachers in art and yoga who've begun to use art and yoga as therapy. And our children with special needs, with ADHD, ADD, autism, calm down so much in these sessions, whether it is using mandala or any form of art or creating a room that is a calming down space where they can just go color on the walls or they can just sit quietly and play with beads or pebbles and run their hands on surfaces. Art teachers have done a lot of work using art as therapy. Our music teacher, who was blind and multiply disabled, Ritvik Rajan, his mother and he use music as therapy for children. And our yoga teacher does phenomenal work with students, especially in the low years, who have problems, who have sitting tolerance as an issue. And they go back after the yoga class extremely ready for the rest of the day. Some of them have gone on to represent the school at national level. Our vice principal started a program called Inclusive Sport with a parent, Ananta Lakshmi, and with an organization called Equibeing, of which she's a part, where our visual children learned to play blind football. So they were blindfolded and they had to learn that a game that's noisy and full of cheering and language, which can get abusive at times, to being absolutely quiet to play football with the blind, because what the movement of the ball and the rings inside it that would chime when you kick the ball, that was your cue. So if you shouted and screamed, you would not know where the ball was going. So we trained the children and we got them to play against a group of children from a blind school, and we lost.
Oh.
And it was such an eye opener for our children that this is possible. And they were always competing with other schools and saying DPS South, DPS North, DPS East. And here they lost. And they were sure that they're going to win that match. Another time, we have these experiential sessions. So recently we did a session with an organization called DID, Dialogue in the Dark.
Dialogue in the dark. Okay.
Yeah. And so they came up with an experience where we were all taken into a very dark room and we were assigned tasks. And we had to smell things, we had to tell what they were, we had to listen to voices and say who the celebrity was, we had to listen to instruments and say what instruments were playing, we had to taste and say what it would be or what spice it would be. And we were given instructions from people who seemed to know everything. We were absolutely groping in the dark. When the lights came on, we found out that our resource persons were blind people. One was a blind lawyer, one was a blind accountant, and someone in some other profession. And it was an experience for us how to be disabled, and that disability is in our minds and not in what people can do. The best part of this was we also asked children from a Center for Autism to join us. And these were students in the age group of 15 to 17. So they were paired with our students in senior class. So our students had no idea who their partners were. And the task that was given to the team was all done. When the lights came on, they had a double whammy. The RPs were blind and their partners were students on the autism spectrum. And they thought they couldn't believe their eyes. And many of them came back with tears in their eyes because, again, the stereotypes are in our heads. And we believe that if you're a blind, you can only be walking with a cane and you can only do this packaging work. If you're autistic, you can only do block printing. And if you're non-verbal, this is all you can do.
And we forget that we are also one little step away from these disabilities or challenges, just one step away.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you look at me, I wear contact lenses.
Same here.
I'm 5'0" I have two teeth that are misplaced, and I have cholesterol and thyroid.
And
This was another learning for me from the United States, that we all in that spectrum of disability. When we are children, we're totally dependent. When we are absolutely old, we are totally dependent. And in between, we are somewhere. And so inclusion is not about independence, it's about interdependence.
yeah.
That we need each other. Everybody needs one another.
Absolutely. While I was talking to one of your special educators, she said that we have a group of parents, and whenever we require a writer or any support, we just send a message and somebody will be available to us. How do you ensure that there is an enthusiastic community available to you and offering their services to you at any given point of time?
DPS North is a family to everyone. So most people whose kids come to us in kindergarten leave us after grade 12. So they've spent about 15 years. And in the 15 years, and thankfully, because the management has created such a culture, our teachers stay. So teachers would know parents, grandparents, siblings, and it goes because the child has been with you for so many years, you talk to them, there's a connect. And I think that is a mutual respect. And I'm so grateful to the parents at DPS Bangalore North, because they've entrusted their most precious commodity with us, with trust and faith. There are times when a problem of theirs doesn't get resolved at the teacher level. They'll go to the coordinator. If it doesn't get resolved there, they'll go to the headmistress. And if then also it doesn't get resolved, they will come and wait patiently to meet me. But they will tell the reception, tell the principal, we're not going. We will wait even if it's the end of the day, but we will meet and speak to her. And I think that is what happens when staff stay with an organization. There is a sense of connectedness between families and the school. You always know, all right, if the principal is not there, I know the vice principal, she was with my child in the early years. So I can go to her. So there's this face that you can reckon to, and that helps a lot. We did something this year, and I'm getting some really good responses from the parents. So every year, what would happen is the child would go from grade 6 to grade 7. The set of teachers would change, the coordinator would change, and children would be shuffled. This year, because we're looking at the NEP in a way, we said, can we look at stability within the segment? Can we look at the teacher and the coordinator moving from grade 6 to grade 7 with the children? And the children don't get shuffled, they stay in their own sections, and grade 7 to grade 8, they go together. At the end of grade 8, which is a change in segment, that is, you're going from middle school to secondary school, that's when we will shuffle, right? Based on the languages or whatever. So teachers, the English teacher remains the same. She knows what struggle the child had in grade 6, and she will try and fill those gaps in grade 7 and grade 8. Because every time you change a teacher, we found that the first 3 months just goes in experimentation. The teacher has no idea, right? So she's waiting for the first test results to come and then start working with the child. But if the teacher were to stay, and I've got responses, very positive responses from the parents and from the teachers, because they've had time to work with children. So we say kindergarten to 2, you stay together. 3 to 5, you stay together. 6 to 8, you stay together. 9 and 10, you stay together, 11 and 12. So teachers who move from 6, 7, and 8 will come back and teach 6. So that's something that we're looking at as an action research for ourselves, because especially for children in the special ed segment, they get lost. By the time the folder, although the special educator will be there, but it takes time for the teacher to know the child and start working with the child, and they don't have that comfort. So yeah, so that's something that we're looking.
It's very comforting to think that you will have a person, and there are a lot of positives there. But as someone who's always looking at what could go wrong, I'm just thinking that if I have a teacher who's already blacklisted me for something, which is what teachers sometimes do, and I will have to live with that person with no hope for the next 3 years, and that worries me.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That's a big possibility.
Yeah.
But then also, that's why we have leadership in place. And
Yeah.
that's why we have coordinators and headmistresses there who know the teachers in their segment. And we're always open to feedback. Again,
Yeah.
very important aspect of inclusion is constant feedback.
Yeah.
Asking for responses from students and parents and saying, what do you think is working? What is not working? So if there is any such case that comes to us where the child says that I'm not comfortable with this particular teacher for this reason, we are absolutely open. They're very open to that, and children know that.
What are the feedback mechanisms that are already placed into school rather than just me coming in and giving you a complaint as a parent? Is there any other system that you have?
So we have regular surveys that happen that go on through Google or through our internal platform. We have PTMs where parents come and meet and give a feedback in written. We also take feedback from parents on the phone. Teachers call up parents and ask, instead of always saying that there's something wrong with your child, we also start calling up and saying, this is something that I appreciate about your child. We are very consciously trying to do this for every child at least once a year. It might go twice a year, but at least once a year, the teacher picks up the phone, calls up the parents, and then takes feedback. We have feedback that can come without a name, but then it becomes very difficult to address the issue. So the parents can meet people at, and there are no scheduled times to meet me or the headmistresses. Parents are welcome. That's one way of representing. We also have a school managing committee where we have parental representation.
Okay.
So those parents can come with feedback from the parent community. Teachers are available on WhatsApp. So that is classroom feedback that comes to teachers.
The reason I asked that very specifically is because I have two children, and of course, my older one has been in a structured place. And whenever I would, and I being an educator myself, would like to say that, yeah, this feedback is great. It would be important to tell, and would end up giving that information back that some child has faced this trouble if I get to know about it. But I was very clearly corrected by my son, saying that please do not go back, because even if it's not an issue that comes to me, I might have to face the wrath of it in certain ways. Now, I thought it was a older child issue. And now my younger son has never been to school till he was 6.5. He was doing self-directed learning. And he went into a different system, and Waldorf system for that matter. And after that, when I again said, oh, shall I tell your teacher that this is something that's troubling you? The first answer is, no, no, don't tell my teacher. So for me, that don't tell my teacher is again a bell that rings in my head saying, why does that happen?
There is this impression, and it's not completely wrong, that teachers can get punitive if the word goes around to the principal and then the principal calls them in and asks them why a particular thing has happened. So while there will be some teachers in the system who will go and say, why didn't your parent come to me directly? Why did they have to go to the principal? Most teachers at DPS North are very open to this kind of a conversation. And they do understand that probably the parent could not reach out to them and so went to the principal, and they're willing to look at the feedback. But yes, we constantly talk to parents and teachers and tell them that, if one parent sees me out of 8,000 children in a week, then I will listen to that parent. right? And they have an issue, I will reach out to you as a colleague to say, how can we sort this out for you and for your child? Now, not all times it is the teacher who's at fault and the system is punitive. There are times that a child just doesn't want to complain or doesn't want the parent to come to solve the issue in school. And so my grandson, who's around 6.5, would say the same, saying, don't go and talk to my teacher. I can do it myself. Or it's okay. You don't have to come and say that my daughter found a scratch on his hand. And he was refusing to say who scratched him, but my daughter was very particular that I'm going to go and tell your teacher this. Right? So that could be a reason as well. But I think there is this innate thing, but there are also teachers where I know when I taught a whole curriculum, the children would say, let's go and meet our biology teacher first, because she'll say nice things about us.
Yeah,
And
of course.
then we'll go to the math teacher.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, true. So, a last question that I have for you is that if you had to give a suggestion to any principal for one probable structural change that they could make tomorrow that would change the life of a child with neurodivergence, what could that possibly be?
Open your hearts, open your gates, empower yourself first, train your teachers, and welcome the child in. That's all. I mean, that's all it takes. Just believe in the strength of diversity. There is nothing, and there's so much that can happen when children are different. There is resonance in the organization. There is an upliftment that you can never imagine, because no day is mundane. Every day is different, because every day a new challenge comes up and you're learning something new, right? But for that, you will need a strong team. You can't do it by yourself. So believe in your teachers, because every teacher believes in her children, right? So believe in your teachers that they can work with the children and make it possible, give them the resources they require and the support to do it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anne.
Yeah, it really changes the world a lot more when people can see that change is possible. It is not just some dream that we are talking about, or it's just an aspiration somewhere. It is actually happening, and it is possible when somebody opens the gate and says, let's find out the answers together and let's work together. And the fact that you have done it and that you're open to constant change and you're even open to conversations from other educators to come in and seek more advice and understanding on solving problems together is fabulous. Thank you so much for your time. It's been
Thank you so
wonderful.
much, Anne.
Yeah.
I look forward to seeing you more in school.
Yes,
Come and spend some time with the team and see what's happening there.
I do look forward to that. And already reading through your documentation, I see that there is some fabulous documentation work that has happened from your team. Just looking at that and seeing how much more can be replicated to be put out there for everyone else as well.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You have been listening to Just Your Normal Misfit. It was wonderful to be with Miss Manju today and having that conversation on how DPS Bangalore North has been working towards growing into an inclusive space. If this conversation resonated with you, do share it with another educator. The hope is to build and to develop and to encourage as many schools and educational spaces that come in where the children can feel, I belong here. Till next time, this is Just Your Normal Misfit and Thomas signing off.